many countries, secessionist movements are illegal. In Israel, for example, you can't promote secession and breaking up of the current state of Israel legally as a political party. You'll get closed down by the Supreme Court. So actually, I think while all of the kind of gripe and nastiness which occasionally crackles through this debate, it's really worth remembering that the whole process is a historical thing. It's really remarkable in these islands, and we should be quite, dare I say it, pleased with ourselves about that.
Jamie?
Well, I mean, I agree mostly with Andrew's point. Of course, these islands don't have a history of non-violent secessionist movements. Ireland, of course, is still Northern Ireland is still a sore spot in the British political psyche. There's a really curious dynamic going on between Spain and the United Kingdom, Catalonia and Scotland. The reason Scotland is getting a vote, partly, is because Westminster is confident Scots will vote no. The reason Catalonia is not getting a vote is because Madrid is not confident that the Catalans would vote against. In fact, if anything, if there was a vote held in the near future, Catalans would vote overwhelmingly in favour. The polls have been quite consistent on that point. Moreover, in Catalonia, what you'll find among nationalists is a huge amount of praise for the UK government in a sort of democratic, legal, consensual way from their perspective. That Westminster has gone about negotiating and agreeing to a vote in Scotland on independence. Among nationalists in Scotland, among the leadership, the SNP leadership, there have been these attempts to court Madrid and reassure Madrid about what an independent Scotland, or rather the breakup of Britain, would mean. So that's a sort of it's an odd interplay of perspectives and opinions.
Doesn't this kind of put a feather in Salmon's cap? Because at the time of the Edinburgh Agreement, a lot of people said, it's just a photo op, it's just a press photo shoot. But, in getting that agreement and formalising the sort of peaceful democratic nature of this, does this not make what Salmon did with the Edinburgh Agreement seem much better now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the significance of the Edinburgh Agreement was lost on a lot of people. As Andrew was alluding to, the idea that Scotland might secede without any great discord is extraordinary, and the SNP understands this. The SNP understands how important the legality of Scottish secession will be in the eyes of international institutions. On the other hand, a UDI in Catalonia could have severe consequences for Catalonia's membership of various international institutions, and there will be lots of states which are just reluctant to recognise Catalonia as an independent country if it secedes from Spain without Spanish cooperation. On the other hand, if Spain is just relentlessly obstructionist and does everything it can to deny the Catalans who have voted democratically by a majority to secede, if Spain does everything it can to stop that, then again Spain's reputation will be seriously affected.
It is a fascinating subject, and absolutely, I think all the way along this constitutional journey, at various points, the Unionists think they've maybe shot the SNP Fox by making some kind of concession or giving us what, they've helped take us along these stepping stones, and to some extent where we are today vindicates Alex Salmond's policy all the way back to the 90s of the whole kind of fundamentalist versus gradualist approach and the stepping stone approach. He has brought everybody to this path, if you like, supreme tactician and political tactician of our times. But it is really interesting to set it all within the international context. So if you look at tiny wee nations like East Timor, who were being thwarted absolutely in their ambitions to become independent, they took to the international stage and drummed up international backing until it basically became compelling, and that they had big countries and little countries, they had the UN supporting until basically they were allowed to hold the referendum. Catalonia might end up doing the same if Spain continues to obstruct any idea of a referendum. It's always struck me as something why we've not done it in Scotland to the same extent, and partly that it is because of what Jamie was talking about the kind of complexities of geopolitics, if you like, and the interplay of different interests. And that's because we would have found it very hard because of the UK's place, a permanent member of the Security Council and elsewhere, to make those same demands. It's always easier for the big countries to come in support of a very small nation, or where there's clear obstruction or there has been repression using arms, if you like, of our kind of civic movement. But we've not had that at all, and we've not taken it out on the international stage in a way that other nations have. And all these things will be really fascinating, you know, when the historians start looking at about the kind of constitutional journey in Scotland 20 years hence.
Yeah, I think so. With the Spain situation, don't mention Gibraltar, or then it just gets all horrifically complicated as well. But okay, I think we can move on to something a little bit closer to home. And there was a lot of chat over the summer. Where is Johann Lamont? And I think this week at First Minister's Questions, it became clear that she's been preparing her next own goal. I think I'll go to Andrew. Did you see her attack that was meant to, you know, possibly imply corruption and all sorts of things, but it turned out not to be quite the story she was hoping, I think.
Yes, I think that's it. Certainly high. It's certainly not the story that she told, which was, just to summarise it for folk that maybe didn't see the delightful performance. Essentially, she suggested that Scottish ministers had acquired land for the purposes of Glasgow Airport rail link from a businessman whose name I forget off the top of my head.
John McGlynn.
So they purchased land from John McGlynn for the purposes of setting up this Glasgow Airport rail link that was subsequently cancelled for, I think, £850,000, a very substantial sum. Then, as we know, the Glasgow Airport rail link was cancelled and it was sold back to the same fellow for £50,000, which is not all that much. And Johann Lamont was essentially suggesting that Eck or some other villainous money grubber in his employ had deliberately done this in order to empower a Yes supporter to the tune of £800,000. The only problem is that, as the Labour transport spokesman found out in a parliamentary answer, who bought the land? The answer is the SPT, which is run in large part by a board of Labour politicians from Glasgow. So the underlying claim that ministers were at it was simply false. I think it's quite striking, though, that, some people have been treading through this, working out, well, there's bound to be incompetence. I mean, it's outrageous that the public purse is down to the tune of £800,000. I mean, somebody's cocked up. And in this context, it might be telling to think about, well, who gets the uplift, capitally wise, from the increased value of land? Because there's a reason, I would have thought, why it was so valuable, and that was because of the public transport process. But the public got shafted, and a private individual recouped the value of public investment. That doesn't seem right. But I think it was interesting that Lamont just went so extreme in her immediate allegation, and so dodgy. I mean, it's quite a claim to make on a sugary empirical basis, when actually you might have thought she ought to have known better. So it was a rather brave line of questioning, I thought, from the Labour leader there.
Was that politically brave? Is that like Sir Humphrey? It's the most courageous thing you've ever done. Yeah. And, James, did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I can't speak to the specifics of it. I didn't follow it as closely as Andrew, but it sounds to me as though it's an example of the Labour press office getting it terribly wrong again. Labour is not well served by its press team. Just doesn't do a very good job. It doesn't research things as thoroughly as it should, and it doesn't refine its arguments and its attacks as clearly as it should. Kevin Pringle a few months ago tweeted about how Labour's first instinct is always to appeal to the press. It's always to try and embarrass Salmond and the SNP in the press. And obviously, in the first instance, it's the job of a press office. But they're just not very good at it, or at least they're hit and miss at best. So it sounds like it's another part of the party that Lamont desperately needs to overhaul in a much more radical and thorough way than she has done so far.
And Kate, did you see this story?
Yeah, I did, absolutely. Coming back to the actual, how on earth did this happen in terms of somebody being able to make a profit out of a compulsory purchase effectively and back. Ian Smart's done a very good blog on it, and actually the rules are quite clear because they were always designed to protect kind of landed interests, if you like, in such a circumstance. And at the end of the day, you know, we can all point the finger at similar transactions involving, you know, Labour supporters. Willie Hawkey's land transactions spring to mind in terms of his relationship with Glasgow City Council,
Do you mean Sir William Haughey, as he is now characterised in the press?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that, to be fair enough, that's deserved because he's also a big philanthropist. Do you know, that's the way it is at the moment, and that's the way the rules work. There are some who make money out of these situations, and there are those of us who are destined never to make money out of anything very much. And that's the way it is.
I know that one.
I have a bit of a different take on it politically. In that I think Johann Lamont knew exactly what she was doing, and it was entirely deliberate and part of an entirely deliberate but misguided strategy. I think, Jamie, you're right in terms of they don't join the dots enough and ask the what ifs, in terms of they don't clean their copy enough in the press office. But she knew what she was doing, and she knew she was using parliamentary privilege to allege things that couldn't be unsaid, that couldn't be said outside of the parliamentary chamber. And it's all part of a strategy to chip. Basically, they're throwing mud and hope some of it sticks. And it is entirely about chipping away at Alex Salmond in particular's reputation and about encouraging mistrust in him. And it's driven by two things. The absolute visceral hatred of Alex Salmond amongst people like Paul Sinclair and others in the Labour Party who cannot distinguish between the SNP and Alex Salmond and think that this is the right way to go. And then the second thing, which is that they're not actually playing the referendum ball, they're playing the 2016 ball. And I think on both counts they're absolutely wrong. I'm making a fine mess of it, which, you know, you both have said more eloquently than me, absolutely making a mess of it. And because, you know, there's only so much the mainstream media can help them with, because when they're making such inaccuracy, they make such wild accusations, you know, and there's signs even of the Daily Record occasionally coming back and finding them out, you know, and if that's happening, then they're in trouble.
They've been running this get Salmond strategy for years and years and years, and he's still the most popular politician, the most popular party leader, and they've really not winning all the elections that are going. They're really not getting anywhere with it. Do you think they'll ever change the record, Andrew?
Well, I suppose recent polling shows that Johann Lamont is the only leader with a positive rating, with a +4. It just so happens that 30-40% of Scots have never actually heard of her. It's just a bit awkward. I think eventually they will. I mean, I find the Labour predicament, watching it, to be fascinating. I mean, I take Kate's point about there's a kind of dual strategy on the go here, and there is an eye to 2016. But I still remain, I mean, not as someone naturally sympathetic to the Labour Party, so do take what I say with a pinch of partisan salt, but I kind of look at what they're doing, and I look at their arguments in public, look at their claims, and you think, what is your strategy to take back 2016? What are the signs? What are the initiatives? What's the arguments? What are the policy points? What's the kind of message you're taking out to the Western Isles, to Dundee? What are you doing in these places? And I can see, I'm afraid, not an awful lot. I think I was probably saying that a year ago, and if with any luck, I'll be saying it in a year's time too, to be honest.
Jamie, do you think this strategy is ever going to get them anywhere?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I agree with all the comments made broadly. I think Labour's problem is twofold. They have two problems. The first is one of definition. So no one quite knows what Labour stands for when it comes to policy, and we saw that over the Something for Nothing fiasco, or over devolution. Labour long styled itself as the party of Scottish Home Rule. Yeah, with just a year to go until the referendum, we still don't know what their plans are for the next phase of devolution, and that drives voters away. If voters can't clearly identify a party, if there's no brand there to endorse, it won't get endorsed. The second is structural. We're talking about a party that's been in structural decline now for 10 or 15 years. It's lost votes at every devolved election since 1999. Its control of local government was shattered in 2007. Its membership is falling as far as I can tell. They claim they have 20,000 members. They sent out 13,000 ballots in 2010 for the 2010 Miliband election. So this is, and there's a glaring deficit of talent, an oft-noted glaring deficit of talent among the MSPs group. So dealing with the press office situation is important. In fact, it's urgent. But that's one element in a much larger crisis for the Scottish Labour Party. I think there's a broad sense that Lamont is really a caretaker leader. Her job really was to ensure that the party, when she took over at the end of 2011, just to ensure the party still has a pulse.